Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks very much for being with us. Financial assistance to Arkansas farmers of color. Dollars they need and will soon begin receiving from a new federal program, opposition notwithstanding. More on that later in the broadcast. First, every farmer needs water, but never too much. And in southeast Arkansas, there is much too much. So much, in fact, that Governor Hutchinson has declared it a disaster area, and he's made available emergency financial assistance. Skies are clearing for now, but the impact on Arkansas's farm sector in the months to come, well, that's our focus up top. And we're joined by Dr. Jarrod Hardke of the University of Arkansas's Agriculture Department, the System Department. Doctor, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
You have literally been out in the field assessing, surveying. How extensive is the damage geographically?
Geographically, we generally consider south of Interstate 40 overall to have been heavily impacted by the rainfall. Certainly DeShay County and the Dumas region would have some of the highest rainfall amounts and be considered, an epicenter portion, but areas of Arkansas and Jefferson County as well, the Stuttgart area and to the west southwest, also very significant amounts of rainfall near those experienced in DeShay County, though perhaps not quite as much. So a very wide area of the southeastern portion of the state.
Well, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of acres.
That's correct. Impacted in some way. Certainly some extremely severe, but hundreds of thousands impacted in some capacity.
Where in the season for us city folk? Where in the season are we?
Well, in many years we would be considered close to mid-season, the middle portion, though this has been a longer trend this spring of continual rainfall and even other areas of the state having large rainfall. But we're a little behind on planting progress, or have been, so we're not quite as far along. But that southeast area had made some of the best progress that they have experienced in the past several years, perhaps in 4 or 5 years. And a lot of the inputs and progress in the crop have already been completed. And so we were well on our way in many instances. Corn, again, getting a little technical, but to the point of tasseling, when you begin to actually produce and make those ears on the plant and begin to create those soybean pods, which are going to hold your soybeans. We were there at that point.
So it was that sector that had it sounds like the most to lose from excess water.
That's absolutely correct. So soybeans in that scenario, if they're submerged for essentially 2 days or more, they're not going to survive. They have to have oxygen available to them to respire and survive, and so more than 2 days submerged, they're not going to make it. Corn will survive a little bit more for longer. It will be impacted. One conversation I had just this morning, some corn was so deep, we think of corn being 10 feet tall, that size. Well, only the very tops of the corn were still sticking out, the tassel portion out of the very top of some of that crop, and certainly some of the rice completely submerged, though rice is certainly flood tolerant to an extent.
Yeah, a lot of water then.
That's correct.
Yeah, well, and I was going to ask which crops are the most vulnerable, but I think you've just hit that. We think, though, of rice as being, you need farmers flood rice fields. I mean,
that's correct. Rice enjoys a shallow flood. We refer to it as a semi-aquatic plant. It enjoys and tolerates good moisture or a shallow flood. The extreme is older, more mature rice, again, still middle of the season, is certainly more sensitive to being completely submerged. A week or more, again, certainly more tolerant than soybean to survive, but they can survive that long. Smaller rice that hasn't been planted for very long can survive for a pretty lengthy amount of time if conditions are cool, but now we're transitioning to these hotter temperatures. Flooded conditions moving to hot temperatures is a very bad recipe.
Any way that you or your associates in the other sciences can determine when this water is going to go away? I mean, how to mitigate this loss?
There is no way at this time. It's simply a waiting game. Again, estimating the amount of loss that's going to occur. It has to do with how fast it's off, and the clock is certainly ticking. A number of those soybeans, again, that are still underwater in any capacity are probably going to be considered a loss. The damage has been done to corn, and then as we touch on rice, the levee system that we typically employ to maintain our floods when we want it flooded, and all of those fields have been, those levees are now lost or washed out and we can't maintain a flood. So now this is a trickle down long-term economic impact of being able to repair and restore those levees and our ability to properly manage and water our rice crop, which again is going to have a long-term effect we can't quite yet measure.
Under optimal conditions, though, is there a possibility of a second planting, a second crop?
Well, so if we look at, in the case of soybean, right now, the planting date that they were under, that the crop was in,
right,
if we were able to replant those soybeans today, the yield potential would already be 10 to 15% less today than it was when they were originally planted. And all of the primary inputs in that crop have already been implemented, and so it's a complete start over in terms of the production cost of that crop.
And you're up against the calendar as well.
That's correct.
In terms of climate and calendar, that
yes, absolutely. From here, the reality is nothing on most of these soils. Even if we got the water off today, it'll be another week at minimum before we can get conditions dry enough to even begin to think about starting over.
Can you even begin to estimate the dollar loss to the ag community?
Being conservative initially, hundreds of millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions? Yes. Yeah, for the widespread area impacted, again, getting outside of just some of the epicenters being considered at this point, you have those smaller effects of areas that still received 8 to 10 inches of rainfall, maybe not at the forefront of the issues, and certainly not the widespread flooding of businesses and homes as well, but to major impacts to the crop.
What about consumers? What's the consumer's stake in this?
Well, the stake from there is what it's going to do in terms of overall, probably more at the local level of the production and what it means for local jobs and handling these commodities and the production that we'll have, and lead from there.
Well, and we also note that inflation, this is coming at a time when inflation is really taking off. The Fed, everybody else says, this is a temporary, this is an aberration, and interest rates or consumer prices will fall. But this could not have come at a worse time.
That's correct.
Timing's bad.
Yes, it's very bad. And again, for our overall production, given the spring, Arkansas already grows 50% of the rice produced in the United States, and we were already seeing a drastic reduction in our acres this year, partially due to other commodities, but also just to the weather conditions in planting this year. And again, it's going to further impact the production of that commodity, of which we're a very large part nationwide.
We'll continue to follow this story, Dr. Jarrod Hardke, and we hope that you'll help us follow it.
Yes, thank you very much.
An ag story now of a different sort. Thousands of minority farmers across the country, including Arkansas, are set to receive federal debt relief payments. Involved are almost 20,000 farm loans, individual loans granted either by the Agriculture Department or private lenders. The program's advocates say it's just compensation for decades of discriminatory treatment, both by federal agencies and the farm credit industry. And they're prevailing over the objections of some white farmers who call it reverse discrimination, and from the farm capital establishment, fearful of lost interest payments. More on that in a moment. First, in this month's Good Roots segment, a look at an Arkansas farm family that's helped bring about the payments.
Major funding for Good Roots is provided by Arkansas Farm Bureau.
Arkansas Farm Bureau, advocating the interests of Arkansas's largest industry for more than 80 years. Arkansas counts on agriculture. Agriculture counts on Farm Bureau.
Farmers symbolize grit, hard work, tenacity, especially legacy. We're here at a watermelon field to visit with a family in Grady, Arkansas that know all about it. I'm Logan Duval, and this is Good Roots. Markets are just part of the story of agriculture, and for some farmers in the Delta, it's taken some very special characteristics to get here.
Let's fill it up.
Fill it up.
The more the better. I'm Abraham Carpenter Jr. I'm the manager of Carpenter's Produce Farm, located in Grady, Arkansas, Lincoln County. I've been managing the family business ever since I was 12 years old. My dad and the rest of the family, they entrusted me to do it, and everybody just kind of fell in line. Mama originally started with 1 acre of land. She made more money off the 1 acre of land than my dad made working all year long at the lumber company. He said, well, now, if you're gonna make that kind of money, I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna grow produce full time. My major crops are greens, cantaloupe, watermelon, peas, okra, yellow squash, zucchini squash. We grow some of the biggest, the sweetest watermelons in the whole United States, maybe even the whole world. I don't know, but I know they're sweet.
Is there anything that brings people together like a watermelon?
Man, I'm telling you.
Hot summer day.
Good watermelon, good cantaloupe, and blood red.
Blood red.
Hey.
Is it sweet?
Hey, man, I'm telling you, you want to get a taste and you tell me how you like it there.
Is this the ticket?
That's the ticket, man. I'll tell you, it's nothing better than a good sweet watermelon.
There's nothing.
Nothing, man.
Watermelon's kind of been good to you. The produce business is it's a business.
We grow about 250, 300 acres of watermelons every year. People love to get those good sweet watermelons. And I know you know about watermelons. You can see the sugar in that watermelon, man.
Sugar. Just dripping off.
That's the sugar, man.
I think the specialty aspect where y'all made a pivot back away from the commodities and into produce.
Yeah.
That was a business decision.
Well, that's true, brother. My dad them initially started growing cotton and soybeans. Went broke doing it. So we kind of regrouped and started growing produce. Been doing it for 50 years. Been real good to the family, man. Raised 5 brothers, 3 sisters, and 28 nieces and nephews.
28 nieces and nephews.
On the farm.
On the farm.
And everybody was able to live a decent, comfortable life.
Watermelon is absolutely amazing. Let's
well, thank you, brother.
Let's go see where they come from.
Let's do that. I tell you, we got a field full of them, too.
When Abraham was 5 years old, he was a leader then. I was bossy, he was bossy, so we just combined that bossiness together and made it happen. Want to cook Daddy some of these?
Yeah, I think we should.
I am Abraham's baby sister. I work here at Carpenter's Produce and Fish in Pine Bluff. Okay, no pickles. All right, Mr. Brown, thank you. I started working when I was 7 years old. It was a lot of us, and everybody got their own little different attitudes and all that, but we made it all come together. Everybody had a purpose, and we all mixed it up together and made one big family. That's how it worked.
This is definitely legacy. You got the baton when you were 12 years old.
I did. That baton is going to my children, my nieces, my nephews, grandchildren. We've taught them, we prepared them with the ability to plant the crops, to grow the crops, produce it, market it, and send it out to the stores. We've done all of that, and we've built them faith from ground up.
Thank you very much.
20-some years plus back, there was a lot of discrimination inside of USDA. We had prior lawsuits filed against USDA for racial discrimination. The attorneys came down from Washington and they presented it as you join the lawsuit, you get $50,000 and your debt relief. $50,000 didn't mean a whole lot, but the debt relief would have been major. Some of us got to $50,000 and no debt relief whatsoever. It was a big letdown for many farmers. That's the reason 20-some years later, you know, we were still fighting to get the right things done, just to be treated fairly. I'm really happy that the legislation passed and it's going to benefit a lot of farmers. The only thing that breaks my heart is the fact that so many others have passed away, you know, and without being able to realize this come to fruition. You know, my mother, she passed away in 2017, and before she passed, it wasn't a day that went by that she didn't ask her, Junior, how the lawsuit coming along? Is we gonna get any relief? I said, Mama, it's coming. So she's looking down on us from heaven today, but Mama is here.
After spending time with y'all, the theme of family and hard work and faith is everywhere. You're the next generation. What's the future look like?
I plan on going to college and majoring in chemistry, learning about the chemical compositions and things like that. Being here and not just learning from someone else, but coming outside with Dad at 6 a.m. and we're in the fields and we're looking hands-on. It's a different experience.
It is. So you might be a little bit of the anomaly that you're not wanting to run away from the family business and be a part of it. So what do you think the difference is there for you?
It's the people that you meet and they come back and they're like, we took it to the family get-together and everyone enjoyed it, or we had it at family time on Tuesday night. You have an effect on people's lives. It's more than just growing it and shipping it off here. You get a connection with those people and they come back and they tell you the effect that you had on their lives.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I'm so excited to see what the future holds for the Carpenters.
Yes, sir. It's definitely bright.
It is, yes. An afternoon with the Carpenters can be summed up as family, perseverance, love. For Good Roots, I'm Logan Duval.
Joining us now, Dr. Dewayne Goldmon, an Arkansas farmer, but also Senior Advisor for Racial Equity to the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. Fellow Arkansan, thanks very much for being with us.
Good to be here, Mr. Barnes.
As the dialogue made clear, there were long-standing allegations in federal litigation of discrimination by the federal government, by private equity or private capital corporations, discrimination against farmers of color. How? Particularly by the government.
Let me back up and say, first of all, I have to pay homage to the Carpenter family. Abraham Jr., who I consider a personal friend of mine, we grew up with him, so I'm very proud to see that. And his final comments.
Full disclosure there on your part.
Oh, full disclosure, yeah. But his comments really resonated with me. Your question was, how does this discrimination pretty much manifest itself?
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
rephrase.
Farmers of color.
Well, you have to understand that agriculture, one, is a business. But what makes it kind of unique is that agriculture is a business where done correctly, each generation builds on the successes of the prior generation. In the case of black farmers, unfortunately, each generation has to suffer from the discrimination that was afforded to the prior generation. So there is a cumulative nature of discrimination. And so when my father is denied benefits that white farming neighbors have access to, it starts to show up in a lot of different ways, in the infrastructure, in his annual operating budget, in his style of living, in his ability to improve the farm, to update equipment, to access the latest resources that are available. And when you stack those, when you layer those things generation after generation, it finally shows up in that there is a very definable, disparate gap in the resources that are afforded to farmers of color versus their white farming neighbors. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but can you be specific, Doctor, about what form did this discrimination take? Particularly by USDA or other federal agencies?
Yeah, so I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's talk about land acquisition. And I'll go back to say that if I inherit 1,000 acres and a 40-acre block next to me becomes available, I can use that 1,000 acres as collateral to secure that 40 acres. But what if I didn't inherit 1,000 acres and I wanted to do that? Then I have to come up with alternate collateral. And so because of the precipitous amount of land lost in the black agricultural community, balance sheets were negatively impacted, so that today's farmers are still struggling with the fact that they are not as well capitalized as their neighbors. And then let's look at the annual payments that come to farmers, okay? The most recent example would have been those payments that came in response to the pandemic. And another recent example would be those payments that came in response to some disrupted foreign markets, the trade payments. We call those market facilitation programs. When we look at the distribution of those payments, we find ourselves in a situation, and we're talking about a pretty good dollar amount, $26 billion. When 10% of the farm population only garners 1% of the total payments, 10% would be approximately the percentage of farmers of color. 1% would be the amount that of those payments that they garnered. So the only group left are, let's face it, white farmers. So white farmers garnered 99% of the payments and so that's a disproportion. And then when you peel that back and look at it, you find out that there are other things that led to that. Some of those payments were based on established yields and production history. And so if you've been denied access, you find yourself in a situation where each time you get to a point where the government payment becomes a larger part of your annual operating budget, you find yourself getting further and further behind. Multiply that by successive generations, and it gets to the point where you have some pretty dramatic inequities.
Some white farmers have alleged that this is, their term, reverse discrimination. Your response to that? In terms of loan forgiveness.
Yes, I've heard the term reverse discrimination. I've heard reparations being thrown at this. And I disagree. Reverse discrimination would be more of an issue if there was not a case of discrimination in the first place. But there have been multiple class action settlements that have proven a tragic history of discrimination against farmers of color. Pickford for black farmers, Keepseagle for Native Americans, etc. As Mr. Carpenter just explained, one of the tragic failures of those, class action settlements was that they did a very poor job of providing the debt relief that was promised with those settlements. So much so that those farmers that were promised that debt relief are still at a significant economic disadvantage to their neighbors. And so what the American Rescue Plan said is, look, we understand that this debt that we keep hearing about is still a problem. Let's take care of that debt first. But there is an equally important set of things that need to happen in order to make that more meaningful. There's a whole effort ongoing throughout the department, and I'm leading the department through this effort, but there's an effort going on to restore trust and address those things that led to those cumulative effects in the disparities that we see.
What about the corporate community there? They had a financial stake in this, and so they've got shareholders, they've got interest payments that went into their books as an asset, and suddenly it's not there. What are they supposed to do?
Well, here are a couple things I would like to point out. So, a few facts about the American Rescue Plan, and it pays a debt for qualifying farmers as of January 1st, 2021. It's a debt payment. It's not some kind of debt forgiveness that prohibits these farmers from doing additional business with the Farm Service Agency. And these are both direct loans that are entirely with the Farm Service Agency. The ones that you're describing, we term as guaranteed loans, where the funds are actually guaranteed by the government to a third-party lender. That program has worked well because it's been a good investment in taxpayer dollars to provide more resources to farmers to make them more efficient and profitable, et cetera. The thing that's different with this one, though, is that these farmers that are going to be receiving the debt payments automatically qualify to come right back through the door to do additional loan business. So if these farmers are paid off and are now a little more liquid, it seems to me that that would be a prime customer that if I'm a bank, I would want to do additional business with you to help you grow your business versus being concerned about the loss that's on a loan that's about to be paid off. And so that's the approach that we're taking, that we've been mandated by Congress to help these farmers that have been historically underserved, discriminated against, denied access to resources, finances, et cetera. We've been mandated to address these concerns, and it's a two-step process. Pay the debt, restore trust and confidence, do additional business. I think those are ample opportunities for the financial community to continue to engage with these borrowers.
Yeah, and Dr. Dewayne Goldmon, I got to end it there because we're simply out of time. Thank you for giving us some of yours.
Thank you so much.
Good luck in the new position and come back often.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next week. Hold you.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.